You doing?
Doing doing great. How are you?
I am doing well. All right. So listen, for the busy professionals that are out there, we're going to do something a little bit different during this webinar. And in case you forgot the title, this is how to create skills assessments that predict performance in an AI age. And so basically, AI broke the resume. Now what? And so, those of you that are registered, thank you so much for being here. We're going to go back and forth conversations, slides, and actual software. So uh, uh, it's going to be a little bit different because normally you get drowned in PowerPoint, or you get drowned in kind of conversational, which is great, but then it's basically a podcast. I've talked to Nick about this, and I want to show some software. I want to actually see software where he says, where we talk about like skills assessment. And he's like, oh yeah, I get this question all the time, etc. So why don't we do introductions? Nick, why don't you introduce yourself first?
Thank you, and thank you everyone for jumping onto the session. I'm Nick. I'm the director of customer success at Canditech. So I spend most of my time having conversations like the conversation we're having today, talking to hiring teams about the best way to embed skills-based hiring into their process. Been working in TA and hiring for about 16 years. Spent the first 10 years as a recruiter myself, the last six in HR tech, specifically focused on top of funnel sourcing challenges, is
Right.
where my experience has been.
William Tincup, been in the industry for more than a hot minute, and Canditech is a client of WRKdefined. We first met them at a Recruiting Innovation Summit, RIS, in Vegas. Fell in love with the firm, fell in love with the tech, fell in love with the founders, and haven't stopped since. So um, let's do a couple things. So what I want to ask you is the objections that you get naturally when you're talking to people out in the field. You're talking to people like that, basically like you, your former self. What's the objections today? What do people what do people tell you that yeah we can't do that, or yeah it's too expensive, or yeah what objections do you hear?
Good place to start. And actually, let's address this because it's often the elephant in the room that we hear from hiring teams is we love the idea of skills-based hiring for a ton
Right.
of reasons that I'm sure we'll get into today, but particularly because of the top of funnel sourcing challenge that has been created from AI. But the work to implement skills-based hiring just feels too big because traditionally it would require a
Right.
hiring manager who was the expert to go and build assessments, to write the questions once candidates had taken the assessment, to then score them, subjectively take decisions on all of the answers. And it got to a point where it's easier just to say, let me just meet this person and speak to them rather than go through this process. But actually, I think the first place we can start, if you really want to jump into software today, is just how easy AI has made it to create and implement skills-based hiring at scale within an organization. So actually,
100%.
oh, go
You,
ahead.
while you're pulling that up, I'll talk to the audience. Hey, listen, one thing in the chat. So we got Q&A, we got chat. We've got to treat them a little bit like the same. Make sure you tell us where you're from and ask any questions that you have, because we're going to be monitoring that and making sure that it's nothing worse than being on a webinar or being, an attendee of a webinar and have a question and they didn't address their question. So we want to make sure that we hit all the questions that you have. All right. Now, what am I looking at, Nick? What do we have here?
So what you have here is where you land when you log in to a Canditech account. It's a super simple platform to navigate. There's really only two spaces to worry about. One is assessments. That's where your tests are. The other is candidates. That's where the candidates are who have completed assessments. So, previously, if we think about before AI, to implement skills-based hiring at scale was just hundreds, if not thousands of hours of work, depending on your organization size. So we've put a lot of effort into making this such a quick process that you can go from brief to live deployed assessment in about 5 minutes of being in the platform. And this is always a moment when I show potential customers or our customers
Right.
how we approach this, where it's like, oh wow, I didn't know it could be this quick. So there's two cool things I'll show you right now. The first is we actually built essentially our own language model, but the outcome is you'll have a built test from the conversation you have with it. So if I click into create an assessment with AI, you can come into
Right.
this window and just say, hey, I'm hiring for, let's say, a
That
digital.
looks like that looks like ChatGPT interface.
It does. It looks like ChatGPT, apart from less hallucinating and more focused on building an assessment. So,
Right.
firstly, it will ask you, hey, can you share a job description? What other information do you have? then you can provide that info, but you can start layering on top any insights you've actually had from the hiring team, because we all know job
Right.
descriptions don't always tell the whole story. And then it would actually start to build an assessment for you. And once it's built it, you can start saying, no, I want you to change that. I don't like this bit. Can you edit this? What's really cool about this though is that we have a library of over 500 pre-built sections that you can use as
Right.
plug and play, and that's the next thing I'll show you. And previously, the way this would work is you would say to it, "Hey, I'm hiring for this. Can you build me an assessment?" And it would go into that library and find relevant sections. But
Right.
ultimately,
Right.
the feedback that we got was great, but sometimes it's a bit like a round peg in a
Right.
square hole. It doesn't always
Right.
fit. So now it can autonomously create sections that don't exist in our library based on the information you're providing it. So you can have a fully customized assessment ready to go with active candidates taking it. Like I say, from brief to live, 5, 10 minutes. So super quick. And this could be for any role type, by the way, legal, marketing, data, finance, or really complex algorithmic or engineering challenges. The second thing I'll show you is actually our library. So you could very simply come into our library. We've got, like I said, over 500 pre-built sections. They cover pretty much, I'll zoom in, pretty much every area, data, healthcare,
Right.
HR,
Right. Right.
for example. But also we cover other areas. So in Canditech, we're very holistic. We don't just focus on one thing. We focus on skills, cognitive behaviors, personality tests, of course, AI skills. It's super important. It's probably what 95% of the conversations I'm having with teams are at the moment about AI fluency, prompt engineering, critical thinking. How can people be more productive and showcase they're more productive with these tools? Leadership
Can you show
management.
me? Can you show me an one of those AI tests?
Yeah, for sure. So, for example, if we look at, let's go
Yeah.
at the advanced AI literacy assessment.
Oh.
You can
Okay.
just you
Okay.
can preview it over here. All
So
this
you can see, I can see the correct answers, but they can't.
they definitely can't. That's really important. That's really important to mention. The candidate does not see the correct answers. But actually, there's some really cool things as well. So you can use open text for
Yeah.
AI assessments too. So you can say, hey, look, here's a task. You've got three things you need to complete. In this case, it's about summarizing a weekly sales report, and then the candidate can write the answer. And what's really interesting is in Canditech, we can actually use AI to auto score open text
Right.
responses as well. Same for video response actually. So I'll show you this because it's one of the biggest unlocks for teams in terms of the time they save, not having to manually review every response from a candidate. Is if I
Right.
come over into AI auto scoring, you can actually set up different scoring agents. So we can use
Right.
AI to score language proficiency in any spoken language, by the way, not just English, conflict
Right.
resolution skills and objection handling skills, but also teams can input their own scorecard against a question into the system.
And because this was B2B sales, it was set up for that conflict resolution, objection responses, etc. So depending on the position description, you're going to have different ones that line up with that.
Exactly that. And actually, it's
Uh,
interesting because I think a lot of people, when they think about skill assessments, they think
right.
technical role types or role
Well,
profiles.
that's how we grew up. Is skills testing was mostly, I'd say pre ChatGPT was skills testing was taking a test on Java or whatever it was. So there's a lot of heavy technical skills testing, and we've obviously grown since then. So can you detect if the person is using AI to answer questions?
So it's actually a very it's an interesting question because
Right,
yes to an yes is a short answer, but actually when AI came to the scene, the biggest request we got from companies was how do we stop candidates using in our assessments? Now we
right,
have got lots of proctoring features that do detect suspicious behavior, things like
right.
tab changing, copy and
Yeah,
pasting,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
IP
yeah.
address switching, stuff like that. But what we champion is job simulations. Now, very simply, for anyone who's not familiar with the term, a job simulation is giving a candidate a task that mimics the work they'd be doing in the role. So you can really see how they would perform if they were in your organization. Now, considering that most positions today require AI usage, in any role, a marketer might be using it to refine their
Right.
campaign performance, a salesperson to refine their prospecting strategy, a developer, of course, the vibe code. It doesn't make sense to stop candidates using AI in an assessment because actually, what? Go ahead.
No, it's especially in AI. So the AI assessments that people are trying to figure out literacy, etc. I would want to know that they know how to do those things. So I want to know your literacy. Okay, that's just let's start there. I want to know your literacy, but I also want to know, can you use the tools that are available? Can
One
you use those tools, and all you're using those tools? That's great. That actually is better for me because I not only know that you have literacy, but I also know that you know how to use the tools.
Exactly that. And it's better to allow them to use the
Right,
tool, but in a way
right,
that it's controlled where you can actually see how they've used
right,
it. So
right.
we approach this in a couple of ways. So actually what I'll do is I'll go into an assessment. So you'll see how this would look for a candidate. So
Okay.
firstly, they're always fully branded to the organization using them. We've got a very cool video on this one.
Why not? That's
A very
cool. It's
familiar.
Bourbon Street, New Orleans.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then the candidate gets some instructions. They know that they're being, monitored for suspicious behavior. They can see what's coming up in the assessment. Then they can begin.
Right.
When they begin, if I jump into this assessment, for any question type, it could be technical, it could be sales, finance, marketing, legal, we can give them ChatGPT. So they can open it
Right.
up over here and they can start working
Ah,
with the language model, but the whole transcript is recorded. So if I say, I'll just say, why is the sky blue? That's my go-to. When you're reviewing the completed assessment, you can actually see how did they prompt engineer? Did they understand when the language model was maybe hallucinating or not giving the right information? And if so, how did they critically think around that? Or were they relying too heavily on the output? By the way, we have some question types where we can actually poison the language model. So if the candidate just puts the question in, the response it will get will be incorrect. And then they have
right.
to work around that to come to the right solution. So this is one interesting way that you can assess for AI fluency because you can see it in action. Another interesting way actually is by setting up scenarios. So, for example, you could give a candidate a task that normally would take an hour without AI, but only give them 20 minutes to complete it with AI. Now you're seeing how
Yeah.
productive they are.
Ha-
Or you get
speed, speed and accuracy,
speed and
actually. So
accuracy,
you,
exactly. What
which is
most
what you,
companies are looking for is more productivity out of
right.
people by using AI. So that's what you really want to, how you want
Which
to
is,
set
as
those.
a recruiter, when you're a recruiter, that's what you want to know. Okay. You want to know, can they do the task? Can they do it fast? But also, can they do it at the right quality level that you have? Jennifer uh, asked a question, and it was before we went into this bid. What prevents candidates from using AI to answer questions? We're kind of encouraging them to use AI in a way, especially different assessments are going to do different things. But in this case, we want them to use AI. We want to see how they use it. And the transcript, which again, this is all going to be recorded, so you can go back and look and see how they've used it and what their skill level is. You can probably assess what their skill level is based on how they're prompting.
For sure, for
But
sure. But
Jennifer,
also,
thanks for asking that question, and please keep them coming.
to Jennifer's point, there may be situations where you don't want someone using AI. So in,
Right.
in that case, the way we have things set up over here, so within the assessment itself, firstly, the candidate can't actually, you won't be able to see, but I'm trying to copy this text over here. It's impossible. I can't grab it, I can't copy it, and I can't paste it anywhere. It's just not
Right.
copyable text. The second thing is if the candidate's in the assessment, then let's say they do something they shouldn't. So I'm going to exit the assessment. I'm going to go over to here. We'll call this an external source. And I'm going to copy something that I shouldn't. Let's pretend I've just gone to ChatGPT in another window and I've asked it a question. Now I'm coming back into the assessment. It's going to be flagged. Hey, we've seen you've done that. We know you've left. And also we know where they were in the assessment, how long they were in before they
That's
left,
right.
how long they left for. We know everything, and you'll know it as well when you're reviewing the candidate. And if they choose to go a step further and they paste something in, we know that as well. That's all recorded, it's all tracked, and actually your team can play it back keystroke by keystroke in the test report, so you'll know exactly what was pasted
Yeah.
in. The candidate, if they choose to continue doing it, fair play. It's sometimes you might allow them to, and that's fine. But if you're hoping they're not doing anything like that, you'll be able to see if there's any suspicious behaviors happening
I
in
love it.
the assessment.
Okay, so Mark Lane, whom I know because he has a wonderful podcast on the network, Ghosted by the Machine, and so in this case, you'd be the machine or a part of the machine. He says this is an amazing tool. What companies are utilizing the program That might be the $1 million question for job seekers. So what do your customers look like? Are they big companies? Are they smaller companies or international companies, et cetera? Just give us a broad overview of the types of customers you're dealing with.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We work with some of the largest publicly traded businesses in the world. We work with companies like Wix, Fiverr, Monday.com, Deloitte, EY, Equinox, all the way through to some very small startups, scale ups. So really companies of all shapes and sizes. We work across about 100 different industries, which is actually really interesting because what we champion is simulations. We're
Right,
now we're now seeing them being adopted in so many unique ways. So, for example, I'm working with a bank, and they were historically using us for more complex trading types of positions. But now they're even using us for tellers who are sitting in retail banks, and they set up scenarios like, hey, a customer walks in, they want to change something on their mother's account, their mother's not there. What do they do in this situation? Because the regulation is really strict, so you need to know if they
right,
understand. You might
right,
have for a customer service role, you can really customize these. Actually, if I flip over to here, here we've got a video in this section, but you could have things like sound clips, document screenshots. Some
right.
companies will have a sound clip of a really unhappy customer, and the next question for a customer service agent is,
Ha-
"Hey, respond to this.
what
What
do
do you
you do?
say?
Yeah,
Yeah, what do you do?" So because you can customize these and really implement them across any sort of role type, we're just seeing the adoption across so many different industries
So
continue to
Nick,
grow.
when you were a recruiter, when you hear the word customize, you automatically think, "Oh my God, how hard is this going to be? Like, how is this going to take me out of my job and doing customization for software?" Even though it's a great assessment, even though it'll help me and get better quality candidates, etc., the word customization has its own kind of triggering mechanism for hiring managers and recruiters alike. So, how do you deal with, you hear it. So, customization sounds like hard.
Yeah, I agree.
How hard is it?
I agree. And firstly, I want to apologize if I've given anyone, if I triggered anyone with PTSD of
Uh, uh,
previous SaaS customization projects. So
yeah,
there's there's a lot that you can customize. So the first thing that you'd want to think about customizing is actually score weighting and also the time you allow for a candidate to complete a section. And what a lot
right,
of people do is they play with time to test for pressure or working under pressure. So let's say I've just
right,
opened up the assessment we were just in from the editing screen. So let's say I want to change the time limit. Okay, I click the time and I change the amount of time I want to set. Let's say I want to change the score. I click the score and now I can individually change every question score weighting. Let's say I want to change
right.
the question. I just click the pencil. I can now edit the question. Actually, we've got an AI assistant that will help you rewrite the question in a way that the candidate will reasonably understand what's being asked of them, which is, obviously important.
Right.
Let's say you want to add an image. Click here, add an image, video, file. So it's all very easy. And actually, you can also not only customize the assessments themselves, but you can customize how you want to present your brand to the candidate. So, that
Right.
screen you saw with the picture, with your video, you can just come in here and you can just, make changes to the copy, the background, the videos, the brand coloring. And what some companies do is they will change this for every assessment they have because they'll have the specific hiring manager of that role record a video to
Right.
really personalize the candidate experience. So it's, hey, we're really looking forward to getting to know you. We wish you the best of luck in the assessment. Hopefully we'll meet you in the future. And it's just those small nice touches can make a big difference. So
Sounds like I could customize this, which is good.
listen, I
Um,
always
and I,
I always say it's been made simple enough for me to explain it. So I promise you anyone can do it.
it's okay. So we had an anonymous attendee ask a wonderful question about what if they're using their phones to get external support? Is there a way to? I mean, nothing's foolproof, nothing's hack proof. Like, I know that been around the block a couple of times, but they've got to obviously their desktop or their laptop open. They're using that bit. What if they're using their phone to answer the question?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's something that
It
comes up
is.
a lot. So, I think to your point, firstly, nothing is 100% foolproof or cheat proof. If someone truly wants to cheat, they'll find a way to do it. What we've built is a set of features that will capture where there's suspicious behavior. That said, there's two features that we use, or two things that we use to try to combat if someone is trying to use an external source to to get an answer that way. Number one is we do IP address monitoring, so we can actually see how many devices somebody is pulling up when they're taking the assessment. The second is if you choose, you can actually take a snapshot through the candidate's webcam every second
Right.
whilst they're taking the assessment. So you will see
So
if
if they're
they,
looking down,
yeah, if they're looking down, if they're picking up their phone, if you'll notice it, it will come up in the
Mark
screenshots.
brought up the point. What if they just have another laptop right next to them,
Yeah,
and it's like you'll be seeing their eyes go off camera and looking
you'll
at another laptop.
You'll see exactly that happening. And actually, we have a customer who used to have to sit, well, someone in the organization would spend about 5 hours a week observing candidates take assessments,
Right.
and they don't do that anymore because they've got the snapshots.
Yeah.
But actually, I think one of the most powerful ways we help companies detect if someone is trying to do something they shouldn't is actually in the way that we recommend that you use question type. So anytime you've got an assessment and you've got a question like this spreadsheet, right? The
Right.
answer to solving this spreadsheet is it's objectively right or wrong what the candidate does. There's expected outcomes. If they achieve them, they pass. If they don't, they fail. Anytime you've got a question like this, we recommend that you follow it up with either an open text or a video question where you ask a candidate to somewhat explain what they've just done. Because if somehow they managed to cheat and they bypassed our features, they've used an external source, they're going to have a really hard time explaining what they've just done. It's going to be difficult, especially under time pressure in a test environment. And that typically comes out in the answer. Actually really, really clearly over video as well, where it's quite hard to confidently talk about something you don't
Right.
understand. So there's a
Nick,
few things you
Nick,
can do.
on the front end of this, whenever we have assessments, one of the things that we know just historically from behavioral and personality types of assessments is letting the candidate know how long something's going to take. So the assessment that you're about to do, it's going to take roughly 30 minutes. Okay. The second thing is because we have a lot of tech that's involved here, giving them an idea, giving them not only an expectation of time, but also how not to cheat. Okay, we want to get a real idea of your skill level, and we want to have a really good understanding of what you can and can't do. That's the thing. So, like giving them do your customers ask you about like why do candidates bail on assessments?
Yeah.
Like
So
what's the reasoning for that?
yeah, I think just to your first point, it's really important for candidate experience that the test length is set up in the right way dependent on the seniority of the role. In
Right,
some cases, you might just want a 10-minute assessment
right,
that a candidate can complete on their mobile phone, and that
right,
gives you an objective data point as to whether you want to progress with that candidate to the next stage or not. And you might do that just post application, just post recruiter sift. It can be really early on in the funnel. For something much more senior, you might have a 90-minute assessment, but maybe it's deployed after the first hiring manager interview and used as more of a
right,
work sample to guide that final stage. So you really do need to think about the length in the context of the role, firstly, for
right, right,
experience. Secondly, what we recommend is giving the candidate a window of time where they can complete the assessment, let's say 4 days. But once they start it, they have to complete it in that set amount of time.
right. Can't go back and forth. Yeah,
Can't go back and forth because actually there's research that shows it creates more anxiety when you allow
right,
someone an open-ended amount of time, firstly, but secondly, it means that one candidate might take an hour to complete it, another might take 5 hours to complete it. They might both do as well as each other, but you're not comparing apples to apples when you're looking at those results because they
how,
just haven't.
how do we know, and this could be an if do we know at this particular point in time that that candidate is that candidate taking that test or that assessment?
Yeah, it's a great question because some of the stories that I'm hearing right now with fraudulent candidates,
Yeah.
I read a
Hello, my
report.
name is North Korea.
Yeah,
Anyhow, but
and I read a report that by 2028, 25% of all candidates will be somewhat fraudulent. So it's definitely
right,
something to think about. So the way we solve for this is we have about 40 ATS integrations, pretty much, all major systems we can integrate with. When we integrate, you can send the assessment link through the ATS, and it's a unique link that only that candidate can open. If they
got it.
forward that link to someone else, that link can't be opened. So it's unique to
Ah,
them.
okay, that's good.
That coupled with using video questions, and actually I've not shown what these looks like, so I'm just going to flip over to a video question. Will making the candidate actually record a response, so it's like this, where they have
Oh,
to
and that's
record
just
their record their response in let's allow
Right.
this. The
That's
way they
hard to fake. Yeah.
yeah, unless you've got some amazing deep fake technology that you manage to spin up super quickly, it's difficult, right? So it's not only about the proctoring features that are obvious, things like copy and paste detection, but it's the usage of different question types, the usage of unique links, all of this combined helps you mitigate against cheaters. I will take this off because it's probably weird having me twice on your screen, so we can move
No,
that.
it's not. Not at all. No, it's not at all. Mark asked a question about VPN. Do we have tech that can kind of also understand what they're doing behind their networks?
So I guess to the extent that where we're tracking IP addresses, if the IP address suddenly switches to a country where you don't expect the candidate to be, that would be a bit of a signal. And actually, if I come back over to here, when we're looking at analytics of an assessment, so I'll click into the report over here, you get some amazing data, and I'll touch on some of this shortly. But one of the things you can see is where in the world the candidates were
Yep.
completing your assessment. And if you're only sending your assessments in North America, but then you're suddenly seeing a lot of people in Australia take your assessment,
Right.
so something's happened. you
Yeah,
know,
something's off, and that's half the game. Is just understanding where is it off. Okay, then you can go back and start to look at okay, this is being used, it's being passed around, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, exactly that. And actually, as we're on this screen, there's something I would like to touch on, which is, there's really no point in building an assessment, deploying it in your process, just so you can tick a
Right.
box and say, hey, we're now doing skills-based hiring. It's a
Yeah.
pointless
No.
exercise. It takes up a lot of time. Really, what you should be seeing is improvements through the process thereafter. And that should look like better progression rates through the stages. It should look like your hiring managers spending less time with the wrong candidates and
Right.
ultimately a better time to hire. And later, it takes a few months to start doing this analysis, but you should then start seeing a better quality of hire as well. What
Right.
we typically see is an 80% reduction in interview hours, which is great. And
Yes. Check.
the way that we work with our customers is through continuous improvement based on the data. So what I can see here for an assessment is the section by section scoring
Mm,
breakdown. So it's showing me firstly the minimum and the maximum scores and the average scores, but also the average solving time. What this might show is section two in your marketing assessment is being
mhm.
passed by 80% of candidates with like 90% scores in 10% of the allocated time, i.e., it's not complex enough to act as a strong enough filter. So that
Right.
alone gives us some data to go back and say, hey, we should probably restructure this and create a stronger filter. But where it gets really powerful is when we couple this data with any anecdotal data you get from your hiring teams of people who are passing the assessment, but then they're still failing in the interview. And if you
Right.
start to ask why, what are they failing on, you can then start to build questions around that stop those candidates ever getting to that stage again. And that's where you start building a really strong data
It's
fit.
just a quality pipeline. That's all that is at the end. You want especially if you're a recruiter and you're presenting a slate of candidates, you want that slate to be the best slate humanly possible. So these little calibrations, I would call them, I'm sure y'all have a more technical term, it gets them a better slate of candidates at the end. Listen, we're being asked uh, by a bunch of people about access, and so Nick's talked about customers, but one of the things they do with all their prospects is they'll let you have Canditech for I think it's 30 days, right?
Yeah, and actually, let me flip over to here. So let me present this. So we will give anyone 30 days of access to the platform, so you can really try it out. But actually, with our support, so we will help you get everything set up. We will help you
Right.
build simulations that you can then go and send to live candidates who are currently in your interview process at the moment. You can also share it with internal colleagues, and you can get their feedback and their thoughts as
Perfect.
well. I don't think we've touched on this just yet, but we do have an in-house, as well as the library, as well as the AI builder, we have an in-house test development team, PhD psychometricians led by Dr. Moran Seller, and they can work with you to make sure that you're building psychometrically validated assessments that you can then deploy in your process. And we can
Right.
also support with things like the AI scoring, so you're getting really quick signals about who the right candidates
So
are.
what I love, y'all know my background, but what I love about this is they don't just give you access, which a lot of companies would just say, "Hey, here's your access code. Go ahead, tool around, have fun, whatever." They'll actually help you set up, and Nick said it, they'll help you set up your first assessment. So they'll walk with you and show you how to show up But once you see it, then if you want to buy, great, go on and do a full demo and do all that other stuff. But I like software companies giving access to users, but they usually drop them off at the deep end of the pool and expect them to kind of figure it out. And what I like about this is it's like, no, no, we'll hold your hand. We'll give you the access, but we'll hold your hand and help you through this first process so that you can see how easy it is and how important it will be to your overall funnel.
Yeah. And I think that's important, right? Because no one is expected to be an expert in how to build assessments. That's what we're here
Right.
for. We're here to provide that guidance and that support. But I'll tell you the truth, most of the time, after we've helped someone once, they normally say, I got it.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
We're good. We've
That
got
that that, that would be me. We've been reminded to also go back to skills, the importance of skills assessments. So we started there at the very beginning, but the importance of why are we doing this in the beginning? Why even do skill assessments at the beginning? Which, by the way,
yeah.
you get asked pretty much every day. Why would I take this on? Why would I do it? Yes, it's hard. Now you've made it easy, but why do skill assessments?
Look, I think it's no surprise to everyone on this call that hiring has just changed massively
Mm.
in the last couple of years. Like I said, I've been doing this for about 16 years and I've seen lots of changes, but I think now is one of the most unique times, of course, because of AI. And if we think about resumes broadly as a concept, they've always been, in my opinion, an imperfect way of getting a signal of, how strong someone would be in
You're
a
talking Mark Lane's language right now.
yeah,
Go
yeah,
ahead. You keep going.
exactly.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think though with there's a few things. Firstly, they're self-reported. They talk
Right.
about what
Right.
someone's done, not what they can do, and they rely on signals like education or where someone's worked before, their job title. None of this
Loaded with bias, by the way. But yes.
loaded with the bias or unconscious bias, however you want to phrase it.
Yep.
None of it is predictive. When you
Right.
now layer in the fact that candidates have access to these tools where they can custom tailor their resume to hundreds of applications in the click of a button, and when I say custom tailor, I mean have the exact keywords from the job description in their resume. So when their resume hits the ATS, the AI screen it in the ATS and pushes that resume to the top. The feedback that I'm getting from companies is every resume looks the same. I don't know who to focus on and I can't identify who the right people are. That plus application volume has gone through the roof as well. On average, for roles, companies are getting about 340 applications. So, you couple the noise with the fact that everything looks the same, it's really difficult to start the process with the right candidates. So,
Okay.
when you
Oh no,
deploy,
finish your thought. Finish your thought. Go ahead.
oh, sorry. So when you deploy an assessment, you can actually just get objective data about who has the skills you need without worrying about these other, more traditional signals or data points like where they work, like their job title. And it
I'm gonna
becomes more
get
meritocratic for sure. And also, what we often hear is companies end up hiring people who actually on paper they probably wouldn't even have considered.
right. I'm going to get to the question that someone's asked about the difference between skills testing and job simulations, but we're going to do that. We've got a number of questions that, first of all, Arnaud, I had my Deutschland shirt on yesterday. I've got like 10 jerseys. None of them are the U.S. men's national team because I think they suck. But one from George that I wanted to kind of get back to. At what point in the process funnel do most of your customers introduce this? What are the completion drop off abandonment rates and how do you account for candidate accessibility?
Yeah, great, great. So a couple of things. Really, where you deploy it very much depends on the seniority of the role. For an entry level position, and also actually not only the level of the role, but the problem or the challenge you're trying to solve as a business. If you're drowning in thousands of applications every month, your team don't have the time to sift through all of them, then you probably want it early in the funnel regardless. But typically, you'd look at the seniority of the role. If it's more entry level, probably just post application. It goes straight out to the candidate, and you can automate
Right,
that in your ATS. By the
right.
way, for something maybe mid level off the recruiter screen, and so something more senior, probably after a recruiter screen or a hiring manager interview, then to be used more as a work sample to guide the next stage interview. In terms of drop-off rate, so I'll click over to here because we actually use our averages in our demo environment.
By the
And
way, George is going to love this stuff because he came out of the recruiting space, so a lot of different recruiting technologies like brass ring and things like that. So he loves this stuff. We might have
awesome.
to schedule another hour just to answer all of George's questions. But go
Well,
ahead. Go ahead.
George, just so you know, I love talking about data, by the way, so we can definitely schedule that hour.
Okay.
But our typical open and completion rates are between 92 and 93% respectively. And we actually see a really high completion rate. And we recently, I was speaking to Ryan about this, William, a few weeks ago, but we recently just did a survey where we surveyed about 86,000 candidates. And we asked them at the point they had just taken an assessment, hey, what was your experience? And 95% said they prefer a hiring process that has an assessment that relates to the skills they're being,
Right.
to the role that they've applied for.
Well, if they're skilled, they want to show off. If they're not
Exactly.
skilled, they want to avoid. I mean,
Yeah,
it's kind of a tell on some level.
for sure.
Um, if the completion rate or the open rate drops, does that trigger something for the people that are building the assessments that maybe they should readjust the time or the questions or something like that? Like, because like those two numbers are great, 92, good God. But what if these things kind of dip? Does it trigger anything for the team?
For sure. So these are the things that we're always monitoring at Canditech, our customer success team monitoring and working with our customers on. And sometimes there's small things like someone set up an assessment where they've asked a candidate a super complex question, but they've only given them 2 minutes to do it. Right. Probably we
Mm,
just want to extend that time. And when we extend it, you then start to see the completion rate improve.
right,
But it's pretty rare actually that we see a lower completion rate than what you're seeing on here.
right. Okay, good. Now let's get back to a question that someone asked at the very beginning. So we talked a lot about skills base and the assessments that we can do there. That's it. But you also do simulations. So could you take us into simulations just a bit and tell us a little bit about that world?
Yeah, so a simulation, the easiest way to think about it is, what task would someone perform in a role? So a marketing manager, for example, they would build a marketing campaign. So you structure an assessment on building a marketing campaign. Or a salesperson, they would do prospecting. So, okay, build out your prospecting list. Now go and write your email sequence. Now deal with this objection. So you're simulating the scenarios they
Right,
would encounter in the role. For a developer, of course, it might be debugging code. A finance person,
right.
it could be consolidating accounts or working in a spreadsheet, for example. So if I actually jump back into the assessment we were in before, which maybe I have open up here. Yes, I do. So actually, no, let me start a new one. So if I jump back into this one, this first question actually is an interesting question. So it says, and it will load in a second, it actually says, hey, you're a data analyst and you work at Salesforce. It's your first day on the job. You've been given this marketing data and we want to understand the campaign performance. We want your insights to optimize the activity and improve the performance. Now, if
Right,
you've just applied to a data analyst position, you should be pretty comfortable with this sort of task. If
right.
not, you probably applied to the wrong position or with the
Job's
wrong
job's not for you. Yeah,
job's not for you, right? So then the candidate can actually just come into the spreadsheet and do the work. This is work they should probably be doing every day, right? So I'll come in, I'll add the formulas, I can work through the columns and the cells, and I can complete the task. So this is what we mean by simulation, rather
right.
than abstract, theoretical knowledge questions that tell you what someone knows, fine, but not what they can actually do. And that's the gap that we're trying to bridge.
I can see the value for companies, especially hiring managers and recruiters. Saves a lot of time. You're not talking to people that aren't skilled or maybe haven't been through the simulation, and so they don't really know the job, et cetera. Like, okay, value there. But one of the questions I was asked is, okay, what's the value to the candidate? Is there anything that we can do or anything that's being done to help them if they don't get the job? But they understand their skills a little bit better, or they understand where they kind of fit a little bit better. Is there anything that we provide or we will provide the candidates to help them?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest grievances that candidates have right now, because it's a tough employment market to be a
Right,
candidate at the moment, one of the biggest grievances they have is that they apply to roles, sometimes hundreds, and they get auto rejected and they never know why. They get no data signal, there's no
right,
feedback. And if you just spend any time on recruiting hell on Reddit, you'll just see story after story about this sort of situation. So, and that's because they're becoming one of hundreds of applications to every role. Recruiters are struggling to identify who the right people are. So it's the same challenge, but just flipped and affecting them. When a candidate is able to just jump into an assessment and showcase their skills, let's say they don't make it. at least say no. Hey, it's because of, I took the assessment, I didn't pass the assessment. That's a much stronger data signal than just sending your resume and being rejected and never really understanding why. Was it because of the format? Did I not use enough keywords
Right.
over here? Something like that. If you want, though, and actually I'll flip over to here because I do think this is an interesting shift we've been seeing more recently with some of the organizations that we support, is when a candidate takes an assessment, it creates a test report traditionally used for the company to review the work that happened in that assessment. I'm just going to pull one up. What some companies are now doing is actually sharing this with the candidate and saying, hey, just so you understand why you didn't move forward, here are
Right.
your results. This was our benchmark. So in this report, you can see their total score. Importantly, you can see the benchmark data about how they've compared to other candidates. Of course, bear in mind how many people have taken that assessment. If only it's five, it's not a super strong sample size, but if you've had 100 people go through it, then this data becomes really meaningful. You'll also see the section by section breakdown. And then you can see, firstly, if there was any suspicious behavior, you'll see all of that tracked, but then you can see the answer to every single question the candidate left. So you can go through this in detail, what they did versus the expected correct answer. You can see all the open text responses, if there was multiple choice being used, even if we go down here, you can replay I am Nick. I would use any video response back that the candidate left. So you can see everything. And if you choose to, you can either share this with the candidate or you can tell them, hey, you scored this, our pass rate was this. So you can give them more feedback to help them progress in their job search.
So you use with the video, you obviously do a translation of the video and AI goes through the translation of the video.
Yeah. Yeah. So to be really clear, we never give AI a video to do scoring because there's protected
Yeah.
characteristics
Yeah.
within
Yeah. Yeah.
video. AI can be biased dependent on the training data. That there's been loads of interesting articles about this. So we just
Yeah.
give AI the transcript and the AI will score the transcript. But
Right.
your team can still watch the video. So if it's important to you to understand how does someone communicate, how do they present themselves, how do they come across, you can do that. But when it comes to the AI scoring, it goes to the transcript.
Good.
With AI scoring, whilst we're on it, I'll move over to this question. So this is an open text question scored by AI. So I can see if I zoom in for anyone who's on a laptop screen, I can see here this is the AI score. And I can open up the AI results and I can see, okay, we had a language agent looking at the language proficiency and then a custom agent. If I open up the language agent, I can actually see that the AI gave it a 5 because it found no spelling or grammar mistakes. But I, as a human, which is a weird thing we have to now say in 2026, I I came in and manually adjusted it to a 3 because the human can always override what the AI has done. It can change it. If a human does, it's logged so other team members can see that. And really importantly, it informs the scoring agent moving forward for anyone else who's going through this evaluation. In terms of the custom agent, in this case, there were three rules that were set up. You can see the first one here, the second here, and the third here. And
Mm.
it shows me why the candidate either passed or failed the rule. So in this case, they passed the second one, but not the first two. And I get a summary about why. So it's never a black box. It's super transparent. You can always see
Right.
why AI is taking a decision, and then you can override it if you
And
choose.
do customers do they choose whether or not they share this information with candidates? Like,
Yeah,
okay, so they can choose not to or to
by
based on the
default,
job. Yeah.
exactly. By default, it's not shared with the candidate. It's
Right.
shared with the employer, the organization. If
Right.
they choose to go to that step to share with the candidate, then they can, but it's not an automatic report that's shared with candidates.
Okay. Bob Pulver just asked a question about, is it stored? Is their assessment stored? You said ATS earlier, so that it goes into their file in Greenhouse or whatever ATS that they're using,
Yeah,
and that's
exactly that.
what's
Exactly that. So the way the integrations work, and I'll just flash up our integration page just so you can see some of our integrations over here. And I might actually have them in a slide. Yeah, so I'll keep this open whilst I go through this. But
okay.
effectively, once you plug in the integration, you can start setting up really cool workflows. So, for example, it could be for one role, the second a
Right.
candidate applies, an assessment gets sent out. For
Right.
another, it might be after the recruiter screen, the assessment gets sent out. You
Right.
can then layer in what the pass or fail mark is. And you could say, okay, if a candidate passes the assessment, they're then moved to X stage. If they fail their disposition, that would then trigger your regret email to go out to the
Right.
candidate. If they pass the assessment, what comes back into the ATS is the total score that they got in the assessment. So actually, it would look a bit like this. Flip over here. You'll see the total score they got, so the mark, but then also you'll see a section by section score. So if I move this up to get you a better example, you'll see how they performed in each section. As well
Hmm.
as that, there'll then be a link. So this is what the section by section breakdown looks like over here at the top. Then there'll be a link, and if you click the link, that will take you into the full test report that we just looked at a moment ago. So that's where you can
Right.
get the granular data. So what most companies do, let's say 100 candidates take an assessment, they'll filter by the top 10% of candidates who pass. So let's say we've
Do
got
y'all have a recommendation on that, by the way? Do y'all recommend a cutoff line, or is that depending on what they want?
it comes down to the organization. It comes down to
Okay.
any benchmarking data. You might
Yeah.
have a
Yeah.
few candidates go through it and then start to change it and tailor it based on other results. But
Right.
what most companies do is they will start with a lot of candidates in the
Yeah.
funnel. They'll then share an assessment. They'll then focus on the top 5 or 10%, and of those top 5 or 10%, they might actually go through this full test report. Really do a manual review, understand how they perform. But
Right.
that's a much smaller number of
Yeah.
candidates.
Yeah.
And
Well,
from
it's
there,
figure out where the humanization is.
yeah,
So having AI do a lot of the things, but there's a moment in which humans are involved. Where is that moment? And I can see customer job by job, customer by customer. I was just wondering if y'all make recommendations or you let them kind of, again, it could be if you have 20,000 people that are applying to the job. Okay, that you can't, a human being can't deal with that.
yeah.
But if there 10 people applied to the job, okay, well, maybe the process or the workflow is different.
100%. And I think it depends on the overall volumes, but the ultimate message that we like to share is that AI should not replace a human,
Right.
particularly in a hiring process, which is probably the most human process that there is in business. It's people hiring people. So we recommend that you use AI for manual, repeatable tasks, things like scoring. And there's other reasons why having AI do scoring is an important thing because firstly, it's objective. It's not subjective. It means every candidate's gone through the exact same evaluation framework and things like that. But really, when it comes to the human touch, you wouldn't just rely on AI to tell you, yeah, this person, they pass your assessment, send them an offer. That's never going to happen. You'd use
Right.
that as a signal to decide who your human team should start investing time into for the rest of the stages. And then you'll take your decision based on the data plus the human experience. So that's our general message: is that the human touch still very much should be in this process, and
Well, the
judgment
recruit,
shouldn't just be relinquished.
well, recruiters are being asked to do more with less. So their time, their allotment of time has to be on the most important parts of the recruiting process. And on the most important candidates, dare I say, they shouldn't waste time on candidates that they shouldn't be wasting time on. So this is helping them get to that place where they can do that.
100%.
Okay. All righty. Okay. So we were started with down the path. Again, we got about 10 minutes left. Any questions that you have, we're trying to stay on top of the questions that people ask and also in the chat. So please, anything that you have, forward it as fast as you can. Objections, other objections that you get when you do a demo and you talk to people and they're like, yeah, this, that, and the other, whatever. What objections are you getting, and how are you overcoming those objections?
Yeah, interesting because we recently the way that we structure our questions. So actually, if I come into one of the assessments again. So when it comes to a technical question, for example, the way that we used to structure them, or currently do, to be fair, in the platform is very much, there's a standalone challenge we give a candidate. They then get access to an IDE technical environment, and they can then start working through that challenge and running code. And I'll just move through this assessment to get to a section with that as an example. The challenge is that with AI, the way that technical people work has just completely changed.
Yeah,
They're now very much working with AI
that's
frequently.
right. That's right.
They're in much more complex cursor type environments.
Isn't that
Um,
crazy that we cared so much about their Java code that
yeah,
now it's like, I don't care about your Java code. Can
how,
can you get Claude
yeah,
to, yeah, to the
exactly.
outcome?
exactly that. So this is what we currently do.
Crazy.
You've got the instructions. You can give the candidate access to any backend language you want them to use, and then
All
they
right.
would
All right.
they would solve this. This thing and about to release in 2 weeks is called coding projects, which is
Yeah.
actually the environment they work in now, where in Canditech, the candidate can spin up a virtual machine.
Right.
Within that machine, they'll have all of their files and folders. They'll have Codex, which is OpenAI's version of Claude Code, and soon they will
Yeah.
have access to Claude as well. And they can you could just say to a candidate, "Hey, you've got 2 hours. Build an app. Build any
Build
app you
this.
want. Build
Yeah.
build it."
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. And they can do that. So that was one objection we got often.
What's great is you can also see how they're prompting Claude or whatever in that case, how they're prompting it to get to the outcome.
Exactly, and actually, we can go a step further. So now we can use AI to auto score for speed and time efficiency.
Huh.
So you can see how efficiently they use AI. So you might have two candidates who are working through a coding challenge, and they both
Right.
get the same outcome. But one of the candidates got there in a straight line, and the other one was going like this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
AI
Yeah.
can now tell us who was more efficient with their code. So that's super cool. The other objection we got often is that we didn't offer a live coding environment. It's just something that wasn't, what we what
Right.
we had in the platform. But actually, we got the feedback a lot. Hey, it's time for live coding because the
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
developers collaborate now is different as well because they're working with different models. They're thinking
That's right.
about token utilization and efficiency. They're just thinking differently about architecture. So we have just built a two-way live coding environment where the hiring manager can
Genius.
set up challenges. They can invite the candidate in. They can be on video together. They can work with the LLM. They can whiteboard and go through architecture together. So the hiring manager gets to experience what it's actually like working with that candidate in the hiring process. So yeah, super excited that these are both coming out.
I love it. Hey, go back to the QR code and how people can work with you, etc. So first of all, Nick did this bit early in the thing that you'll have access to Canditech so you can tool around and play and do different things, but they'll also build an assessment with you. So the thing is you'll schedule time and they'll get on the call with you, etc., and say, okay, what's the job you're hiring for? Let's build an assessment or let's build a simulation. Whatever the bit is let's build something together so you can see how easy it is. So just scan that code, and that's actually Nick's email. So that's not a mask or anything like that.
Yeah.
That's actually his email.
Yeah, that's my email. You can reach out to me, drop me a note. We can help get you set up. And importantly, once the simulation is built, you can then
Right,
send it to real candidates, people in
right,
your process. I mean, you can have them take that assessment, and you can use that as a filter that you need. But also, you can get the candidates' feedback. Hey, how was that for you? How did you experience that? What was that like? We often, when people are piloting or trialing Canditech, we often recommend they also have their current employees take assessments as well and get their feedback. Actually, just as a segue, something we're seeing happen more and more often now is companies not only deploying assessments for potential new hires, but across their organization for their existing team. And they're using
internal
the assessment
mobility. Yep,
exactly internal mobility, skills gap analysis for learning and development programs, and very importantly, AI fluency. Because
genius.
what we're seeing now when it comes to these AI tools, which are just growing or evolving at such a rapid pace, is you might have someone in your organization, let's say in your finance team, who has a real personal interest in this technology, and for that reason, in their own time, they've learned how to build apps with Claude Code. They've taken that knowledge into their work. They're now building really cool automation. And this employee has now become super productive. You might have someone else though in your marketing team who doesn't know what a chat GPT is. They have
Right,
no idea. And companies, they don't really know that gap and they don't know how to structure their programs around the skills or the knowledge that people have. So when you deploy AI fluency assessments across the business, of course they're tailored based on role type level and the level of knowledge someone reasonably should have. You can then start seeing the gaps to build out the right training around it to make sure your team are prepared for what's coming and to adapt to this rate of change.
right. Sherry asked the question. She joined a little bit late 'cause she had a meeting. Will she get a recording or can she get access to the recording? Sherry, yes. After everyone is registered, they'll set up a campaign and they'll send the video out and send you a link so you can go watch the whole thing. I would say that it's a different webinar. We purposely kind of wanted to talk. Nick and I have done a podcast together, and so we wanted to talk, but at the same time, so much of this is you also want to see stuff. And so that's kind of a mixture of like, okay, let's go look at a couple things, talk about it, etc. So you'll like that. So that was Sherry's question. I don't think we have any other questions. Got 5 minutes left ish for what's the last thing you want to kind of cover?
Let's jump back over to here. Let's come back into the platform. And actually, I think what we can do a bit more of a deep dive in is our library so people can see a bit more around what's in here. So the way it's structured, firstly, is I can go through job specific skills. So if I want, I can look at, data, BI, healthcare, really anything in this list I can open up and we cover every function of an organization. In terms of cognitive skills, I can do things like attention for detail evaluations, core intelligence, critical thinking, effective communication. We've also got personality tests. So we've got three, the Enneagram, the Big Five, and the DISC.
Yeah,
These give you
right.
really good insights into traits like dominance, conscientiousness, openness. A lot of companies will have their broader team take the assessment and then see how new candidates fit based on the
Smart.
insights they get. Yeah. Um,
Chemistry. Yeah.
yeah, exactly that. AI skills, super important, particularly today. And we've got AI utilization in specific job functions like marketing, customer success, sales. So, how are people using these tools to be more productive and efficient? Leadership management and generic. If you want, though, in my preferred way of navigating the library, because there's hundreds and hundreds of sections, over 500, I can just search. So I can say, hey, I want to hire a data analyst. Now, let me just pull up all the data analyst sections. And if I scroll, it's like an endless scroll of data evaluation or assessment sections. So what I can see at this view is, firstly, what question types are in the section. So this first one is
Right.
multiple choice. This third one is Excel and open text, for example. I can also see if it's easy, moderate, or hard. This one's moderate. I can see the time that's been allocated for this section. If I hover over this I can see what this section is evaluating. And then if I click into it, I can actually see what is in the section. I can preview it. And from here, I can start layering and using these as building blocks to start growing my assessment. And what a lot of companies do is they will have an assessment where one section or two sections is very much focused on the core skill someone needs built as a simulation. So let's say a data analyst will have section one, cohort analysis, section two might be some other sort of reporting. Section three, though, might be a cognitive assessment because a data analyst isn't a data analyst in isolation. They're a full human
That's right.
being, and you want to assess different components of their skill set. And of course, you might then layer in AI as AI fluency, or you might bundle AI assessments into the other sections to see how they use AI to complete those simulations. So you can start building out something really complex. It's not just solely focused on the skill for that role, but who is someone as a whole person. And then you get, really interesting data from that.
Drops mic, walks off stage. Everyone, thank you so much for registering and thank you for attending. 3 or 4 folks I knew or I know, and I appreciate y'all showing up. And again, scan the barcode and spend some time with Nick and his team.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, William.
We're out of here.